So the first portion of the GeoChat will be sort of an interview portion. And if you have any questions during that interview portion, you can put it in the chat box. And then after we will have a Q&A portion for students and faculty as well. So again, welcome Rebecca Nunu. And we'll just get into the questions. So in what areas of geoscience do you use in your current job?
I am a research scientist, like you said, in groundwater hydrology. And so the areas of geoscience that I am particularly working in is hydrogeology, so water resource management. Although I do work closely with other geoscientists, especially in the field of structural geology.
Okay. And do you have a specific specialization within that field?
I do. So my specialization and research interests include aqueous geochemistry, karst hydrogeology, surface water groundwater interactions, and regional flow systems.
And when did you first become interested in geosciences?
So in high school, I just happened to take an environmental science course, which I loved. I've always loved the environment and have been passionate about it, but never really realized that I could pursue a career in that field. I was originally supposed to be a business major in undergrad, but I happened to take a sustainability elective course during my first semester at UT, which completely opened my eyes to all the possibilities of pursuing a STEM career in environmental or geosciences. And so it was that second semester where I decided to really take my interest in geosciences and environmental sciences seriously and see where that might take me in my career.
And what university degrees have you earned?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science with a Geological Sciences focus from the University of Texas at Austin. I graduated in 2016. I also have a Master of Science in Geology with a hydrogeology focus from UTSA, which I received in late 2020.
And was your journey through university continuous, or did you take a break at some time?
I did take a break. So I received my Bachelor of Science, and it happened to be in the same year I graduated that the Environmental Science Institute at UT was starting a collaboration with Southwest Research Institute here in San Antonio. And so the first application period opened, and I, for whatever reason, didn't apply. But thankfully, they extended it, so I reapplied, or I applied the second round and was fortunate enough to receive. When I was promoted to SWIRI and I decided to stick around, I enrolled in my graduate studies at UTSA while working full time. So I made my graduate research work my research I was in at work as well. So it all worked out.
And how did you choose your career pathway?
Well, I think I might have already answered this a little bit based on a bit of luck and coursework and great mentors and people passionate about the field. It rubbed off on me. And so I've just kind of gone with the flow, and that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at, by taking courses that interest me, by taking internships and working with individuals that are really passionate about this kind of work. It's really um, bolstered my interest in this career path in hydrogeology.
And what steps led you to where you are now in your career?
Well, I would say first, majoring in environmental science, and then getting my internship at Southwest Research Institute, where it really opened my eyes to the world of water resource management, and then getting a master's degree, which really helped me become specialized in hydrogeology, and just working with other great water resource management professionals has gotten me to where I am now.
So, what do you view as the most important component of your background that has been the most helpful in facilitating your career trajectory?
Well, there are a number of things that you can do. Of course, you can get a master's degree, you can get your PG, you can take, get all the different kinds of credentials to, bolster that. But what I really view as the most important component is finding great mentors that have empowered me to get out of my comfort zone and pursue the kind of research that I'm doing now. And it really, I give all the credit to my mentors for helping me get to where I'm at. And so I encourage all the other, credentials and education and everything as well. But truthfully, what's really gotten me to where I'm at now is the great mentorship I've received along the way.
So, moving on to more about a day in your work life, what kind of activities fill up your workday?
Sure. So a lot of my workday includes data synthesis and analysis through tools like ArcGIS or Excel or Minitab. Um, Lately, my days have been filled with writing grant proposals to bring in project work and to keep our work diverse and you know, expand where we're working. But there are also days where I'm in the field collecting geochemical data or collecting groundwater samples. So it's really a varied sort of work day that I get to have.
And how have these activities evolved over time as you've um, grown in your career?
Sure. So when I first started, I wasn't really sure what I wanted my niche or my, specialization to be. So I got to dabble in a little bit of everything. But what that included was just supporting other technical people at the Institute with compiling and downloading data, creating maps, doing field work. But as I've grown into the role of being a research scientist at Southwest Research, I had the opportunity to spearhead projects, act as a project manager and a principal investigator. I've also, as of the last few years, recently started writing more grant proposals, which has been, challenging but definitely rewarding. Um, so yeah, when I first started, a lot of my work also was focused on numerical modeling because that was the kind of projects that we had. But as over the last few years, our work has sort of transitioned to focus more on, using geochemical tools and water resource management. So my workday has definitely evolved on doing more work focused on my research interests as I've been at my, current position as long as I have been.
And what are some geoscience related tools that you use in your work?
So when I'm in the field, I always use a multi-parameter probe, which helps collect things in the field, such as temperature, dissolved oxygen, specific conductivity. It's sort of a probe that you calibrate and you put into wherever you're sampling to collect those data in real time. I also use tools like water level meters, geologic maps, which are really important in, the kind of work that I do. ArcGIS is also a really important tool that I use in my work.
Could you like briefly describe those tools a little more for some students who aren't in geoscience as their field?
Sure. So a water level meter is essentially where you take a measurement reel and you put it down a well and you can measure the water level. The water level is important. You can use those data to evaluate the health of an aquifer, and especially if you plot it, um, with respect to other water levels in the area, you can kind of see the direction of groundwater movement, groundwater flow, which is a really important thing that we need to use when we're doing water resource management. I guess I should have photos, but geologic maps include, the cross sections or outcrops of different units that are important that hold water, as an aquifer. Those kinds of things enable us to target particular sampling in different areas. That's important as well. And ArcGIS is an online tool that you can use to plot things spatially. You can make maps, you can do all kinds of spatial analyses online that are really important in sort of, again, in our water resource management work. So I hope that helps define a little bit more about the kinds of tools that we use. Those aren't all the tools, there are certainly many more, but certainly in my day-to-day as of recent, those are important.
And what kind of analyses do you perform in your work?
Well, as I've developed my own research interest in geochemistry, aqueous geochemistry, a lot of the analyses that I perform are geochemical analyses. So better understanding the natural composition of water, you can do that and analyze it for springs or for an aquifer or for rivers. The kinds of things, we'll go out in the field and we'll collect geochemical data from wells and springs, and we'll also use existing data that's online to better understand what the geochemistry tells us in terms of the age of the water, where it's coming from. You can tell all kinds of things about where that water has been. And then I'll also use statistics to better understand where that water is coming from as well. So those are sort of part of what I call a geochemical framework in my work, is using geochemical and statistical analyses to better define where our water resources are coming from.
And what new skills have you developed throughout your career to where you are now?
I have to say that I've developed so many new skills since I've been in my current position at Spheri. That's again goes to the great mentorship that I've had, which I stress is just such an important part of why I'm here or where I'm at now. But I've developed new skills in aqueous geochemistry and its importance in better understanding our water resources. I've developed new skills in programming and using things like Python to interpret and synthesize data in my day-to-day work. And another important skill that I've had the opportunity to develop and gain since I've been in my career is communication skills. So presenting at research conferences or writing proposals or writing reports for projects, that's got to be one of the most important ones, being able to communicate, the research that you're doing to your audience. So, but every day I'm learning more, so it never stops.
And what other STEM disciplines do you use in your work, such as physics, chemistry?
Honestly, everything. I mean, I would say there are certainly more disciplines that are emphasized than others. So I've been talking a lot about chemistry as an important discipline that's applied in my everyday today work, but everything is so connected, and one day I might be relying on physics principles to help me understand something, or computer science and programming to help me synthesize or understand my data better. Math is an important part of hydrology as it governs groundwater flow, so you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. Not everything about everything, but enough to kind of put all the pieces together. So, yeah.
And what courses or skills do you recommend to students wanting to get into your field?
That's a hard question. I think what I would recommend is just taking a little bit of everything to better or get a better sense of what may or may not interest you. So I'd encourage people to get out of your comfort zone and take that course that you may not think is particularly interesting, but you just never know what may or may not resonate with you. I guess if you really wanted to be an aqueous geochemist or focus on water resource management, I would certainly emphasize courses like calculus, differential equations, and physics. Definitely field courses are important so that you kind of understand why we go out in the field and collect the kind of data that we do for this kind of research. Biology, I mean, I would recommend all of it because everything is just so interconnected that you kind of want to expose yourself to a little bit of everything. So, but again, I don't know if I would be in this field if I hadn't taken that leap of faith and that environmental science course or some of the other courses that kind of helped me, you know, identify water resource management, hydrology as my field of interest. So I would just recommend, again, getting out of your comfort zone and just taking a little bit of everything.
Okay, so that was the interview portion. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand or okay, Ireland.
Um, I was just wondering, what has been your favorite research project in hydrology, like in your studies?
Sure. So I have been, and this was actually the topic of my master's thesis at UTSA, and I've been working in this area since 2019. But probably my favorite has been working on identifying where these iconic springs from West Texas are sourced from. So the name of the springs are San Solomon Springs. If you've ever been to Balmorhea State Park, which is out in West Texas on the way to El Paso, there are these beautiful, iconic, crystal clear springs that are located in the desert where there's no other water. And so what I've been doing over the last few years is sampling the springs there, in addition to wells and aquifers all in the study area, to better understand where that water is coming from, so that we can identify areas that may or may not impact spring flow. So I've had the chance to go out and sample for the last 4 or 5 years. We collect from the springs and the wells, and being out there is just absolutely beautiful. It doesn't even feel like work. But I'd have to say that my research on San Solomon has been my favorite.
Thank you. I just was wondering, and that's actually close to my hometown, which is exciting.
Oh, no kidding. Wonderful.
Is there
I have
another
a,
question? Okay.
okay, yeah, I have one. It's kind of a two-part question, but when you took a break in between your undergraduate and graduate studies, did that time help you decide the direction you were going to go with your career? And also, was there anything that maybe you experienced during that time that solidified that direction that you were going to take?
Sure, great question. So when I went to SWIRI for my internship, it was only supposed to be for a year. And to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing with my life, but I applied for this internship and I met this great team. And I thought, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't take advantage of this. But I only expected to be there for a year. And I never thought that I would want to get a master's degree, not because I didn't have the ambition to do so, but just because I just didn't know. And so working at SWIRI for that year was particularly impactful on that decision. to pursue my master's degree. I mean, most of the individuals here have either master's, but mostly doctorate degrees that work here. So there's definitely the culture that, you know, you should go on to graduate school and pursue, you know, a graduate degree. But with working with my mentors, I realized it would be a great opportunity. It would bolster my career and my trajectory. I'd get to specialize in a particular field in geology, particularly hydrogeology, because my environmental science degree was so multidisciplinary that I felt like I didn't get the chance to find a specific focus, but with my master's degree, I did. So yeah, after I worked here for a year, I enrolled and worked part-time while I was in school part-time while I worked full-time. And what really helped as well is that I got to do my master's thesis on a project that I was doing at work. So it was a win-win situation for me. That worked out for the best for me. I'm glad that I did it. Makes me consider wanting to get a PhD, but that's down the line. I'm not quite decided yet, but that's how I ended up where I'm at. Does that answer both of your questions?
Thank you. Yeah, the next part of my question was going to be pursuing a PhD, so you hit them both on the head. Thank you.
And Dr. Haschenberger.
I think I'm next. Hello, Rebecca. So lovely to see you. Thank you for being here. And just so everyone knows, Rebecca's thesis won the Graduate School Award for Outstanding Thesis for the College of Sciences. So not only did she further her education, she grew in really great ways to produce this really nice piece of work that was acknowledged at that university level. My question is, it sounds like this internship that you got was really pivotal in your career. So how did you find that internship? What would you recommend to students who want to get that kind of experience? You know, whatever advice you could share about that, I think the students would appreciate that.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, I was a bit aimless when I was graduating and I missed the first opportunity to apply. But I did so based on the help of one of my professors that I grew very close with during my studies. He actually taught a karst hydrogeology field course and I absolutely loved it. And he had a very close working relationship with who I'm working with now at SWIRI. So the pieces all fell into place. And I got that internship connection through my professor. So my advice is to network, go talk to your professors, go to the TA hours, get to know them, get their advice, take advantage of the valuable resource at hand of, you know, the connections and the network that, you know, your university offers you, because that in the end is really what sealed the deal for me in getting the internship at SWIRI. So yeah, definitely network, go talk to people, go to the brown bag lunches. Don't be afraid to talk to people, because what you'll find is that most people, everyone has been in your shoes, and most everyone wants to help, and most everyone knows what that feeling is like, to maybe not know where you're going to go next or how to network or who to know or who to meet, and they're going to want to help you. So that's what it worked out for me, and I'm so very grateful that I had those connections and those mentors to essentially get me to where I'm at now. So network.
Yep, that's a really important point. Thanks for that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, there's a question in the chat. What was your experience like of working full-time at SWIRI while going to school for a master's? how challenging was it, and how rewarding was it to get the master's degree?
Well, first of all, it was very rewarding. Like Dr. Haschenberger mentioned, I received an award, which was sort of affirmation to me for the hard work I felt like I put into what I was doing. It was incredibly rewarding to have my first big research project presented in this report, and it's helped me learn how to do those moving forward. So very rewarding getting my master's degree. I learned a great deal, made great professors, great coursework, and everything. Getting there was challenging. Working full time and doing part time work is no joke. I definitely had to work on my my time management skills. Balancing a full time job and evening classes and all the different things definitely is time consuming. But in the end, it was completely worth it. I was grateful that I didn't have to take a break in working. Having an income is nice. My SWRI paid for my graduate work, which is a huge bonus, and a lot of employers will. So definitely explore that if you think you might want to get a master's degree while working full time. I wouldn't change anything. I would absolutely do it again. But yeah, definitely you have to work on your time management and balance it all. But I was also very fortunate that my master's thesis was the topic of my research at SWRI. So I was kind of killing two birds with one stone, which definitely helped. But yeah, that was pretty much my experience, and I would do it again if I needed to because it just worked out really well for me. But that's not for everyone, which I fully recognize. So yeah, in the end, it was all very rewarding.
Hello, I have one more question in the chat. This question is less of a career question, but a hydrology question. What are your thoughts on the state of aquifers, considering how much we rely on them? Hearing about our aquifers is kind of concerning because of how much water we really use. Will there ever be a shortage of fresh water if something doesn't change?
Sure, it's definitely a concern. As we go through these prolonged periods of drought where our aquifers aren't recharged as much because we're not getting any rain, and as our population continues to increase, it's definitely a concern moving forward. Our water supply challenge. That's why I do what I do, right? We are doing the science to better understand the water resources we have available so that we can protect them, conserve them, and manage them better. I think there's a lot of great work being done in this field to tackle those challenges and those initiatives. But it's also going to take it's conservation, I don't think is enough. I think we have to get creative in the kinds of things we're doing, like water recycling or desalination, to sort of tackle not only population increases and demands on our water, but also the fact that recharge seems to be happening less and less. And how do we balance all of that? It's a great question. That is something I think about all the time. Overall, I think we're okay for now, but it's also imperative that we are taking the initiative to not get to a place where we are experiencing shortages in the future. So that's essentially the crux of everything I do in my work is how can we manage these waters to be sure we have enough for the future.
So SWRI is not a regulating organization like in this problem. They're more informative to more regulating authorities.
Right. So we are a not-for-profit research and development organization. We do not regulate anything. We purely do the science and the research so that people that are regulators, our policymakers, can use those outcomes from our work to drive policy changes or regulations or whatever. So we are strictly research oriented. We do work for regulators. In our field, there's something called a groundwater conservation district, which is a regulatory entity that basically manages and conserves and governs the water within their area. And we do a lot of research for them so that they know how to manage the water that's in their area. But to your question, we don't regulate anything. We're just strictly science.
Okay, I have another question, again, generally about SWRI. Do they like offer like outreach events or anything where they interact with the public?
We are such a large organization. I think we have 3,000 people that work here, and we have 10 different divisions that do all kinds of work. So I'm in the space science division within our little earth science group nestled in there. And then we have people that do applied physics or chemical engineering. I mean, it's just so many different things happening at the Institute. In terms of outreach like that, I'm not sure that we do, although we as a group make an effort to, distribute the data that we, or the results of our work with the public. 2 weeks ago, I just went to West Texas to be a part of a symposium to share the results of the work that I'm doing with landowners and stakeholders that are interested in the water out there. But like specific settings for SWRI, we'll set up camp to, provide, a speech or a conference or something. It's not generally something that we do. But we make every effort to publish our results in peer-reviewed journals and reports so that people can use those information and then provide feedback. That's part of good science, is putting your data and your outcomes out there and, incorporating the constructive criticism or comments to be sure that, the kind of work you're doing is sound and, publishable. So long-winded answer, I know, but generally, no, we don't do conferences and such like that.
I guess I'm next. I want to return to the internship aspect, but I want you to think about it from the other perspective, because I know that through your participation in the GeoPaths program, you have worked with internees. And so if you were looking to hire an intern, what would you be looking for in that person's background on their resume?
That's a good question. In the kind of work we do, I think I would want to see a little bit of interest in hydrogeology or maybe coursework taken. But I think what really stands out is just the kind of tools you're using. Like, can you use GIS? Are you capable of, synthesizing data through Excel? I don't think I need you to know what hydrology or water resource management is, because I can teach you, but the tools that we use that can facilitate you learning in our group is something that would be really useful. Are you taking varied courses that are, like physics and chemistry that would help us, teach you? Are you pursuing other internships? Are you active, in extracurriculars that are, like, what am I trying to say? Are you involved in like organizations on campus that, I guess that wouldn't really matter. I don't know. Just wanting to, I think what also helps is meeting in person and your enthusiasm and interest in it, because again, I learned everything that I'm doing, as I've been here. I had a good foundation in terms of taking chemistry and physics and biology and all that, but a lot of my research interests have been carved out by learning on the job. So I would just say taking, a good foundation of courses, the kinds of tools that you are interested in using or have experience using are important. I think those would stand out the most.
And if the student had some hands-on project experience, I would assume that would be a very positive thing as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
I have another question, just about the work that you do and the tools that you use. So I'm not sure if you have been working on just one really long-term project. Um, Granted, I'm not sure how long you've been with Swery. Maybe it's been one long-term project or a series of projects. But I imagine if you have a series of projects, there's different tools that would be applied to each project. So I'm wondering if you take the tools from the first project and you kind of use them going forward, or have you been switching between the different tools and the different kinds of analyses that you do?
That's a great question. So I've been at Swery since 2016. Like I said, I started with my internship, and ever since then, I've been here in varied roles. And the tools I've used along the way have varied based on my experience and particular projects. It really depends. So to your first point, so I have had this study area on San Solomon for quite some time, funded by different entities or different groups with different scopes. So it's kind of in the same area, but I've had the opportunity to do different things, like the number of samples I can collect, or, you know, it's just varied in the scope. But I've had this one project that's focused on San Solomon. But I've also had a number of other projects that use similar tools. We've done work out in Southwest Texas, if you know where Carrizo Springs is. There's this groundwater district called Winter Garden, and we created a numerical model for the Carrizo Wilcox Aquifer for Winter Garden. And so that did not really use much chemistry, although developing the model itself relied on results from another project that used geochemistry to develop it, and the kind of conceptual model that we used to create that model. And that required a lot of data synthesis and programming and tools like groundwater Vistas and other modeling tools. But it really just depends on who's funding you to do what. A lot of the work I've been funded to do as of recent has been geochemistry oriented. There are other projects we're pursuing that might focus on, water level sampling, but you may use existing geochemistry data to understand those water level data, right? So it's all interconnected. You can use all different kinds of tools to sort of paint a picture of what's really going on the project. But it just depends on the scope and the funding and who you're working with. We also have someone who recently joined our group a couple years ago who is heavily focused on remote sensing. So for that kind of work, I'm not really doing geochemistry, but a lot more, programming or data synthesis and downloading large data files and such. So it really just depends on who's funding you, what the scope of that work is, and what the outcome is supposed to be. But generally speaking, it's so multidisciplinary that you're kind of doing all of it at the same time or all together.
And
Okay.
hello, I've got one more question in the chat. Did you grow up in this field or see its importance, and then you started pursuing it?
I did not grow up in this field. It was a very fun conversation calling my parents and telling them I was going to study environmental science when I originally told them I was going to go into the business world, because this was just so different from what other people in my family or in my community had typically pursued. I think I took this sustainability course in undergrad and decided that I wanted to do something meaningful. And I never would have thought that I could have pursued a field in the environmental field until it kind of, I took that course. It just opened my eyes to what was possible. And then of course through my coursework and being involved in, you know, my studies, it's important to really begin to be a parent. And that's what just motivated me to really go in and pursue it by getting my internship, getting a master's degree, maybe a PhD. I mean, it's just, it's important to always, it becomes more and more apparent as I work through this field more and more.
Thank you. And that actually leads me to a question that I have myself. At SWERI, I know you work with groundwater. Is there a team that focuses more on surface water?
Good question. Our group is so small that we don't really do that, although we are considering how we can grow as a group into the surface water realm. But, you know, surface water and groundwater are so connected that you kind of, I guess maybe we do. One of the projects I just put in a proposal for is going to look at doing a gain loss survey, or to study how surface water and groundwater interact along the Pecos River, which is out west. But in terms of like being a surface water hydrologist or having a surface water hydrology group, that's not something that we have, but it's something that I think most of us here have experience with, if that is a, you know, makes sense.
Yes. And then there's one question in the chat that kind of feeds off of that one. So what will happen if we no longer rely on aquifers? Are there any other alternatives to consider?
That's a heavy question. I don't know. I don't want to know what that looks like. There are a lot of parts of the world that are experiencing, you know, running out of water. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. Maybe we will. Maybe I'm too optimistic. I think there's just so much going on in I guess in Texas to conserve our water and to hopefully avoid that happening. But I'm really not sure what would happen, whether we would outsource water, would we start, there are initiatives that are looking at using brackish water as a source of water supply. Desalinization, water recycling are alternatives that people are exploring to augment the amount of water that we have available. But I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I don't know if I want to think about that.
Okay, I have a question just about how you feel as a woman in STEM at SWERI. I know that in the geosciences, there's sometimes less women in a workplace or in a classroom or wherever. So do you see that at SWERI? And I guess how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so there are quite a few women that work in our division. I would say it's still, there's still predominantly more men than women. But there's a great community of women here that sort of gather and share their experiences. And I don't know, it's definitely something you think about, like when all of your meetings are, you're the only woman in there. But I guess in my work, it's not, I don't really feel discriminated against, or as if that puts me in a less advantageous position than if I was a man, although that certainly happens in STEM, and I feel very strongly about how we can overcome barriers like that. And that's why I love, you know, sharing these kinds of my experience with other women to show that, you know, it's very doable. There are a lot of women in this field. So yeah, it's not something that I would say I think about often, I guess in my day-to-day, even though there are a lot of men that work here. But so that's why I found it to be, that's why I've stuck around so long, is because I, you know, feel empowered in my position. I've taken on new leadership roles. I've become a project manager and a principal investigator in numerous projects. So it's, I don't know, it's definitely, it's a great place to work, for lack of better terms, as a woman.
Okay, there's another question in the chat. Do you feel we could support our needs from desalination of the oceans, and how realistic or hard is the process?
That's a good question. This is not something that I'm the most knowledgeable in. I'm sure there are other people that could answer this question better than I could. I'm not sure that desalination could fully supply all of our needs. I do believe that we need innovative strategies to combat, our water supply shortages. From what I understand, desalination can be tricky and it can be very expensive, but I think that as we move forward, some of these strategies will become, more economical and will augment the kind of water that we have available. But I'm not sure that desal could completely supply all of our water needs. And I'm not sure that we would necessarily need to rely on that. And I don't know what the ramifications are from extracting significant amounts from different areas. And I don't know. I hope that we don't get to that point and we can ensure that our aquifer water resources are, efficiently exploited and conserved for the future. But that's something I need to read a lot more about. So I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's, definitely a very relevant topic.
Hello, we have one more question in the chat. Since the work you have done has been very multidisciplinary, do you often work with people who specialize in different areas other than yours? And what is the different area of specialization that someone has had that you have worked with?
That's a good question. I think all of us in the group kind of have our own specialty or specialization. For me, it's aqueous geochemistry. I'd say that in our group, or in terms of multidisciplinary work, the most different might be structural geology, but it goes hand in hand in how water flows underground, right? It's often very much controlled by faulting and different structural features. So the kind of work they do is very different than what I do in terms of aqueous geochemistry, but I heavily rely on their expertise to better understand how groundwater is flowing. And I think it's nice that we can all kind of rely on our different niches or our different research areas and play to those strengths whenever we're doing a project or focused on a particular area. So yes, most people have their own sort of specialization. I think that's again what makes us a strong group. And structural geology might be the most different than specialty that I've worked with.
Okay, is there any other student questions?
I just want to say one last thing. Speaking to mentorship and relying on your network, if I can ever be a resource to someone, maybe you are interested in, seeing the kind of work I do, or you have more questions, or if there's anything I can do to be a resource to you because you're considering, pursuing a field like this, I want to make my time available, or I am available and willing and happy to meet with anybody and talk to anybody else about what I do and what options might be there, and particular internships that may be available, because like I said, we've all been in your position, and we all want to empower our next leaders and STEM researchers and geoscientists. So I just want to offer that to the group.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And thank you for chatting with us, chatting with everybody. And thanks everyone for joining, and we'll end the GeoChat here.
Thank you all so much for the opportunity. This has been a real pleasure.